Okay, welcome everybody. Super, microphone is working. It's great to have this bustling room, and welcome back from lunch, everybody. I hope you all could create a lot of connections and build bridges in lunch break. My name is Elisabeth Türk. I'm the Director of Economic Cooperation and Trade in UNECE, Economic Commission for Europe. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today for one of the sessions of the Action Days of Building Bridges, and specifically the session on Innovate for the SDGs, financing for circular startups in emerging markets. So yesterday at the Building Bridges Summit, we had some really, really powerful messages coming out. We had a great debate, and there were a lot of messages about value and values and how to create value and not only destroy value. We had a lot of discussion on externalities, how to sort of like support the positive, nudge the positive externalities, and not only cost and price the negative externalities. And we had a lot of discussion also about how to build the right narrative, and the narrative that is, when we talk about greening, that is also very inclusive and really leaves nobody behind. And today, in the Action Days, in fact, in the 2 days, we will really drill down, and that's why I said it's so beautiful to see many of you being very active and engaged on making these big messages happen and turning to action. In the session here today, we deep dive into a very specific set of actors. We will look at startups, specifically at startups in emerging economies and emerging markets, and we look at questions related to financing and innovation in this regard. For us in UNECE, Economic Commission for Europe, supporting startups to use the power of innovation and supporting startups to mobilize the necessary financing to contribute to and benefit from the green transition is a really, really important topic. And that's why we are also very, very pleased to have our Deputy Executive Secretary, Mr. Dimitri Mariassin, to join us for the opening remarks of this session. And after that, I will introduce the stellar panel that we have here in the room. We had people traveling very far, so many thanks for doing the trip. And I'm sure we will have a very engaging conversation. But with this, let me welcome Mr. Mariassin, and Dimitri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Financing is difficult. We all know it. We all live with our pockets. We need to manage our finance. Financing for SDGs is even more difficult. We heard a lot about that yesterday, scaling it up, making it sustainable. But we raised the bar. We now talk about financing for circular economy and startups in emerging economies. So we're going to you would say, hey, you're tackling a niche issue here. Who cares about circular startups in emerging economies when we have such a big existential crisis the world is facing, the one we talked about yesterday? Well, let me tell you, I actually think this is where it all begins. Will we be able to capture the 70 or 80% of the economy that is not touched by the green transition? Will we be able to create a movement that actually has the small and medium enterprises in low-income economies rise with the tide? Or will they be left on shore? And will we be able to look in the eyes of our children and grandchildren who will ask us, how come, knowing what's happening, you continued investing in linear production and consumption models that you know are not sustainable, that you know are not compatible with planetary boundaries? And yesterday we heard that 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have already been broken. So, on the one hand, an impossible task to create an ecosystem to remove bottlenecks, to scale up financing for what is seemingly high-risk area. On the other hand, without shifting to circularity at scale and in low-income countries, including emerging economies in the region that we focus on in ECE, we can't really tackle this. It will never be enough to have large corporations investing in beautiful green projects. It will never be enough to have large green bond issuances if they do not benefit the small and medium enterprises. And it will never be enough to just, do the easy stuff. Retrofitting buildings, it works. It does contribute to reducing climate emissions, but it's not enough, because we know that only with innovation we will be able to get ourselves out of the deep planetary crisis we're in. This is the motivation behind our member states in the official body of UNECE deciding that circular economy and sustainable use of natural resources will be a core cross-cutting theme for our work for years to come. This is the motivation for us to launch a circular step network of players. We are partnering up with all the leading actors in circular economy space in Europe and beyond. And this is the reason that we, together with our partners and experts at Chatham House, actually focused on mobilizing finance for circular economy as a very particular topic. So last year we produced a piece of research which we hope you'll be able to look at, and we asked the following questions. What needs to happen, and of course my job is just to ask the questions and the panel's job will be to answer them. What needs to happen to create kind of blending instruments that already exist for green transition in general, that multilateral development banks could make part of their toolkit so they can specifically target circular production and consumption models. So multilateral development banks first. Second, what kind of sustainability-linked loans and bonds do we need, and what kind of conditions do they need to carry to promote innovative practices and actually target startup ecosystem, with circularity becoming a key target? Can we make circular economy a vibrant topic in the impact investment ecosystem? I was at the Building Bridges event where several circular startups were pitching and presenting last year. This was inspirational, but this was not a central discussion. So I think today we're moving to a little bit more of a central position with this event. Hopefully next year we'll actually talk about circular transition as a very, very important part of the overall SDG finance transition. So that's one set of questions. Then we need to be sure we know what we mean by circular economy, because there are many definitions out there. It's a word used left and right, for good reasons usually, but without the full understanding of its scope. So in partnership with OECD, Eurostat, in collaboration with such players as ISO, we have started working on definitions, on statistically viable definitions, so that also, and that brings me to a very important point, policymakers can start working on a new generation of regulation and policies that are required to scale up circular economy, and not just in advanced economies, many of which have circular economy strategies, and still the level of circularity of their economies is low. But then emerging economies do not have the strategies, and the level of circularity is even lower. Finally, I think between the discussion with the finance sector, the kinds of questions I asked, the definitions and so on, we need to make sure that the circularity path in the SDG financing, a stream of financing specifically dedicated to circular economy, can find its way into the work of ISSB and other very important standard-making bodies that we heard from yesterday. Now, this is one side of the story. The second one, is there a pipeline of ideas that are actually investable? So it's good to create conditions at the policy level, it's good to create new financial instruments, it's good to promote it, it's good to talk about it and building bridges. But is there a pipeline of investable ventures that can simultaneously be financially viable, can support the achievement of SDGs, so be also socially, environmentally and economically important, and that actually promote circular economy? This is not a simple question, and we hope to hear about some examples today, because in the very complicated, challenging name of this session, in fact, in my view, the most difficult part is the word startups, because you need to have startups that are actually going to use the funding and financing that I talked about. We are very reassured that in countries that we cover, for example, in Central Asia, there are emerging initiatives that prioritize this. For example, the startup in Uzbekistan that's called Don't Waste, and they developed an innovative app that addresses food waste by selling and donating food that would otherwise be discarded. It's a very important, very basic and necessary part of the ecosystem, but can we go deeper? Can we talk about deep innovation that would actually look at rethinking design and business processes? Because circular economy understood as waste management will never go deep enough, will never change the business model. And what we do need to do is create a new generation of business models that would actually shift the way we think about how we produce and consume. One very important subject here is using the power of platforms to promote and scale circular economy. We had an interesting deep dive into this as part of our other initiative funded by Germany, ECE Transformative Innovation Network, where we are already beginning to look at what the Amazons and the Alibabas of this world can do using their unique logistics infrastructure to actually promote circular economy, reuse of materials, and, for example, recycling of critical minerals from household devices is just one example. So we're talking about reverse logistics as a potential boost of a new startup ecosystem on circularity using the power of big and smaller platforms. I'm giving you this as a food for thought. It's just one example of the kinds of conversations that are already happening. But I believe more needs to be said about that. With this, let me once again recap. We believe that the circular economy movement is a necessary condition for us to address the triple planetary crisis. I personally believe that the conundrum between climate goals and social goals that was so central to yesterday's conversation can be solved with scaling up inclusive, bottom-up led startups on circular economy in developing countries. You just create a new sector of economy. You create many jobs. You create inclusion through growth that is smart and green. Finally, we believe financing is needed. There are good models that need to be scaled up. We have looked into this, and we invite you to collaborate with us on how we can further develop this. And yes, we will need a lot of collaboration. So building bridges with the partners like we have around the table today will be critical. Let me close by thanking our Economic Cooperation and Trade and Development team led by Elizabeth and Roxolana Scheles, who's been leading on organization of this event from our side, but also our partners at Impact Hub who have made it possible. And it's great to be here. Wishing you a very good discussion. Thank you.
Many, many thanks, Dimitri. Yeah? And we will excuse you now. Yeah? But thank you for setting us off in such an inspiring and motivational way for our discussion here today. And I think, as mentioned by Mr. Mariasin, there is really circular economy can be a very, very powerful tool. And today, by looking at this niche of how to help startups harness innovation and mobilize the financing to become more circular and get the benefits of the circular economy, that's really something, a very, very valuable niche, as Mr. Mariasin mentioned, and a niche that we hope that will become more prominent in the Building Bridges conversation, and a niche that indeed in UNECE we are already looking at. Now, Mr. Mariasin didn't only inspire us, he also gave us some very, very important questions and tasks, and for this we have a stellar panel here lined up. And I think together with the audience, with all of you, please do get engaged. I'm sure we can find some answers, maybe not all answers to some of these questions. So let me introduce the panel a little bit, and let me start by introducing Santo Bötios, because Santo, you are co-host also of this event here today. You are the co-founder of Impact Hub Geneva, and in UNECE we are extremely happy to be doing today's event with you, Santo, and with the Impact Hub. And I understand the Impact Hub is really sort of like part of a global network, and you're connecting some 16,000 or more entrepreneurs and creative people, also techies, obviously very important in today's world, that they collaborate. And I think that's really, really important. Collaboration is the way to solve today's challenges. So I'm very, very happy, Santo, to have you here with us today and to join us. Then we also have colleagues who traveled and who bring very, very concrete hands-on experience. And Mauricio, I've already referred to you at the beginning, Mauricio Schneider. You are coming to us from Brazil. So you're bringing a very important on-the-ground experience. And you're the founder of So Bio. And that's really a very, very interesting startup in the agricultural field. And I understand maybe it's correct to say that you used to be a startup because you've actually managed to scale up to be super successful. And we will be very much looking forward to hearing from you with your experiences here today. Then we turn a little bit more to our host here in Switzerland. Yeah? We turn to Luca Etta. You are joining us from Swiss Development Cooperation Agency, so that's the development cooperation part of the Swiss government. And I understand in your work, you and Switzerland, you're really looking at how to support private sector development, how to support financing for the green transition. So you will bring us the perspective of a development partner. How can we support all these entrepreneurs and startups? And last but not least, very hard for me to give the best possible and appropriate introduction to Pavan Sudkev. You have so many successes and affiliations in the past. You have worked a lot on how to measure sustainability, how to come up with these very concrete targets and numbers and measurements. But you've also really left an imprint on the sustainability debate, be it in your work with UNEP, be it in your work with World Wildlife Fund, and also in your work with the World Economic Forum. So we are extremely delighted that you join us here today. Very warm welcome. So Stella Pan, and Santo, let us start with you. I think all speakers have prepared a few slides. So in this opening round, I'll invite everybody to present your slides, to present your activity. And with that, over to you, Santo.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Santo. I'm from the Impact Hub Network, so a co-founder of Impact Hub Geneva, rightly said, and I want to give you a little introduction on who we are and also what we do in the circularity space. So let me see how this works. Of course. Sorry, guys. Okay, this is the slide I wanted. So we started the Impact Hub Geneva here almost 10 years ago. But what makes it really unique is that we're part of a global network of over 100, like in over 100 cities across the world. And so we represent, so I sit here actually representing today over 25,000 entrepreneurs and innovators that are part of our network in over 60 countries, and we have also like a large footprint in Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia, and really across the world. And I think what makes our network unique compared to let's say many other organizations out there, that we're a locally rooted network. So when you find, maybe just a question, has anyone been in an impact hub that's not in Geneva? Have you been anywhere? Can you shoot out some cities or names? Zurich? Lausanne? Bogota? Monterrey? Shanghai? Where? Tajikistan? Munich? Jakarta? Okay, so already in this group, that's pretty amazing. That's amazing. So I think what makes the network really, really great, and also what I feel fits into circular economy, is that it's rooted in the local context. Every impact hub is driven and founded by a local team of innovators and entrepreneurs that are also experts in their own economy, and with the mission of supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem on the ground. And that also is something I'm always very key on saying, that when I'm speaking here, the experts are the ones that are in the different impact hubs, and they know their ecosystem, and they know what's really important. So with the Impact Hub Network, we run hundreds of programs across the year, and circular economy has been one of our focus areas for quite a few years. Let's see if the slide shows up into the next one. Okay, no. So, okay, well that was right. So here no. Okay, that's actually not a slide that's supposed to be here. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Technology seems to
I don't. Excuse me, but okay, this is one. I won't go into the details of circular economy, but I can briefly share with you why we have decided to focus on this topic, okay? So in Switzerland, we really looked at if we are to have an impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, where do we have the biggest chance of making a difference? And that's when it comes to sustainable consumption and production. Now, only just in Switzerland, we would need 3 planets to be able to sustain our economy. But what's really interesting about the Swiss footprint is that the majority of our footprint actually takes place in other countries and abroad. And, sorry.
Maybe tech team can help us.
Okay.
Can you control the slides?
Can you control the slides from that part? Because it's...
And then Santo would just say next slide, and maybe the tech team can
Next
then move
slide.
it to the next slide, no? Or we do without slides, yeah?
And I wish I just had them, you know. Okay. Huh?
But
Sorry.
Santo, you can also tell us a little bit about Impact Hub, and if we manage to set the slides up afterwards. Let's try.
Can you take this? Okay. Okay. I'll just do it without the slides, then it's much easier. Okay. So in short, we've started here in Switzerland what's called the circular economy transition. And I wanted to show that slide because it's a circle and it really shows the element of how we approach circularity and supporting circular startups. And I think this is a key to the conversation here today, okay? There is no such thing as a circular startup, okay? The whole concept of circular economy is that we're part of an ecosystem and we need to look at players from a systems perspective, how we feed into the different ecosystem. And so a key element in how we are approaching things is first and foremost, which was mentioned here, okay, is the good understanding of circular economy, the awareness of circular economy. So this was our step number 1. How do we raise awareness of what it is? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And only here in Switzerland, we've hosted over 200 events and reached over 20,000 people. But this is also work we have done across the Impact Hub network. Another aspect, which is really, really key when we come to supporting circular startups, it is the policy framework, and I think we probably have some conversation around that. And this is also where we have put a focus on, okay, what is policy recommendations and research that actually supports financing and opportunities for circular startups. So it's a lot of our work that we're doing is actually even at the policy level. And aiming to make certain key changes. And we probably go into the detail why policy is a huge element here. Now there are another part as well. Okay, great, thank you. Another element of what we're working with is the actual startups and supporting the startups and the businesses. And here we work on a few different levels. One is already on more established organizations that are already existing, making sure that they get the expertise and support to move into more circular models, into pivoting maybe the circular model. So here we run certain programs where we also match startups that have interesting innovations with larger corporates as well, so that we can already pivot inside bigger organizations and work with SMEs and sometimes even larger corporations. And then another part of our work is really this, which is also crucial, even though we feel like it's a drop in the ocean, but that is new circular models, and that's in the startups actually that are on the ground. So today we have, and I'm not going to try to get that slide, but we have supported over 200 startups across the world. In Switzerland, and over 400 particularly in our circular programs as well. So, sorry for losing my flow there, because I wanted to show a little bit also of the different initiatives we have run across the network in developing countries and other places. But I think there will be a chance to share more about that in the next round. Cool, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Santu, and apologies also for the challenge with the slides. I think you really showed us how you are locally rooted but globally connected. That was a wonderful sort of like review here. And I couldn't agree more with you when you say like what is really important is raising awareness on circularity, because it's still a concept not so much understood, influence the policy framework, and of course support the startups in the various configurations as you described them to us here today. And I think that brings me to my next speaker, Mauricio Schneider, yeah, who has traveled to us from Brazil, and you are an entrepreneur, and you're the co-founder and CEO of Solubio. Yeah? So that's something that we really would love to hear more about, this very exciting business model, company, startup that has grown, that you will be able to show us. And let's see whether technology is cooperating. You have prepared a wonderful slideshow. I very much hope that we can see it, but let's give it a try. Over to you, Mauricio.
Good afternoon. That's my third time here. I'm very happy to see this room full of people. Like the first one we had, I think, 20 entrepreneurs. That was back in 2019.
So maybe I'll add. So Mauricio is the CEO of one of the startups that we have supported through our programs. And you came here in 2019, yeah, through one of our programs. And this is your third time you're back in Building Bridges. Yeah? And your journey from when you first time came to Geneva as a small company and into where you're now a few years later just shows why this is an important topic and why also this ecosystem have a really role to play. So I just have to share my super excitement for Mauricio and his story and where you are today, because you've done amazing work, just that I give that context. But over to you.
Thank you, Santu. I'm just going to stand up. I can stay seated. So when we think about producing food, we have three major problems, or four. It's expensive, it's not affordable, we are using a lot of chemicals, and we don't have people to work, because if it's not affordable, why to be there? And we need to produce more food in the next 7 years, 20 years, or otherwise we're going to have wars and wars for food. That's our challenge, and that's why we created Solubio. What we do, basically, we provide farmers with a technology where they can produce their own biological on farm. We take containers there to the farm with biofactors inside. We teach farmers how to produce. It's very safe. We have quality control. We have traceability, everything to produce biologicals. And you can replace the chemicals by biological. And it's 10 times cheaper. You can save up to 70% in terms of costs. And you are bringing back life to the soil, because that's the problem when you use chemicals. You need to increase the dosages because, it doesn't work. The more you use, the less it works. So you need to increase, and then that's the circularity in terms of, it's not sustainable, because become insane, the cost and also the effectiveness of, crop protection products. So we do this, we teach them, and then the magic happens. That's the fight we're fighting. Actually, we are fighting the whole chemical industry. So we've been sued in Brazil for a lot of times. We are working in the regulatory framework. We're investing a lot of money to create the regulatory framework. There is a lot of lobby going on there. We just got a new regulation approved in the Congress last week. There was a 3 years work from Solubio. So that's the war we are fighting today. Let me talk a little bit about the results or some KPIs. We are in more than 400 farms in Brazil, 3.5 million hectares covered. When you got here first time, it was like 25 farms. We produced 120 million liters of biologicals, and when you produce that, you can take away from the environment 20 million liters of pesticides. That's the real impact. And remember, you can save up to 7% in terms of costs. Today we have 700 employees. When we came here first time, it was 25 as well. 55 million euro revenue in 2023, and our EBITDA margin is above 35%. It should be 50, but you know, in Brazil, the interest rates just went up, and then, yeah, we need to change our operation, and it's becoming expensive. And we have raised more than 6 million euros in green bonds in Brazil, which is quite challenging. I'm gonna speak a little bit about later. When you see when the farmers they use our experience, they actually are contributing to 7 SDGs. For example, they are reducing like the costs of these expensive inputs. We are increasing their autonomy. There is the soil regeneration, so we have more biodiversity in the soil. We are generating qualified jobs in rural areas, mainly for women. We are also making them increasing the profitability, and then they don't need, you know, to do the deforestation and everything that goes around Brazil, which is another topic that is not so true. There are some criminals there, but they are not the Brazilian farmers as well. But yeah. Also, we have the reduction of GHG. It's a lot of reduction. We are sequestering actually a lot of carbon, and yeah, we are increasing the fixation of carbon and nitrogen. So those are some of the impacts we have there. We are really connected with the SDGs and all the 2030 goals, so we have so many programs going on there, from, you know, minding focus and women in leadership. We are developing a lot of programs there inside the company. And we are committed to, you know, reach 6 million hectares by 2030, so a lot of things going on there. Couple of things about our, you know, circularity and circular economy. We have one of the most technological facilities in Latin America in terms of producing biologicals, and it's really environment efficient. 22% of our electric energy was generated by solar panels, so the energy we're using. We are reusing water for gardening. We are monitoring our GHG, and actually we are using ethanol in our cars. So 100% of our cars are run by ethanol. So we pay more for that. Gasoline is much cheaper, but that's our commitment. We are also neutralizing a lot of products there. We recycled 70 tons of waste from our operations and 200 tons of our industrial waste. It's almost 99% of the waste we generate in our facility. So those are the type of impact that we have in our business. This is what we do internally, and then there is the farmer that also doing a lot of things. But that's what I want to actually share here. I think that's the most important thing. If you see, when we started in 2016, we came to Accelerate 2030 by 2019. By 2020, we raised 2.5 million euro in a venture debt. That was the first fundraise we did. And we have 10 million euro from Banco do Brasil Development Fund, which it was a loan. And then by 2021, we issued our first green bond, 20 million euros. Then 2022, 30 million euros in green bonds. And then we have our first equity investment from Aqua Capital, which is the main private equity fund working in agriculture in Latin America. Then this year we issued 20 million euros green bond, and now we are finalizing a 30 million round convertible note. So if you see, it's more than 140 million euros in terms of fundraising, structuring capital, but that was not easy. That's the problem. How do we move from point A to point B, from 2019 to 2023? Last year I was here and was sharing. You need to pay, you need to have an external audit that costs, 30,000-40,000 euros. Can you imagine this for a startup? It's a lot of money. You need to hire lawyers and it costs 30,000-40,000 more. It's not sustainable at all. And sometimes there are some assets that, institutions, they can actually read or understand. That's why, I don't know, I know for sure 1,000 startups that they have an amazing impact business model, but they can't get the funds because it's too expensive. And then we talk about blended funds and all those things. I've never seen that. And today, you know, I have a Big Four external audit. I have an EBITDA, 35% margin. So we are making a lot of money, but we need to get more and more and more money. That's why we're raising, and now we are making this safe to have more money. But how do we actually get the money? How do we move the money to emerging markets in a easy way? Because it's insane. That's my question here, you know, because I think just because of our business model, sometimes we were lucky. That's why we are here. But I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think more startups are able to raise this type of money to actually create impact. We need to reframe everything. I think, you know, asset managers, banks, the government, they need to create a different perspective on lending money to startups, impact startups. We need to rethink everything again. It's, you know, seriously, 30,000 to have an external audit that we know most of the times, you know, don't work. We had a huge scandal in Brazil this year, in January. A huge company, very famous entrepreneurs, the big guys, they're actually making some different deals with the Big Four audits. So is that kind of approach we want to have? We need to rethink again from the scratch. That's my, you know, my question here. How can we do that? Let's stop talking and then let's start doing and creating solutions to fund, to actually support our impact startups.
Many thanks, Mauricio. You've given us a big task here to reframe everything, to rethink everything, and to take a different perspective. And that was also very, very inspiring. I still think like what you told us, maybe there are some lessons learned, and you told us a little bit what exactly you are doing. You are replacing the chemicals by biologicals, yeah? And you've told us a little bit about what you have achieved from a business perspective, but also from an SDG perspective, and particular from a circular economy perspective. You've given us quite some concrete elements there. And you've highlighted some of the challenges, the regulatory and legal framework, the auditing and also legal costs, and so importantly, the mobilizing the financing, which brings us exactly to what building bridges.
And there was one thing that I missed.
Yeah, tell us.
In emerging market, it's quite expensive. You know how much is the interest rate in Brazil today? And it's dropping. It is 20% per year. When you first fundraised, it was 9%. So how do I cover the gap?
So that journey you mentioned in terms of fundraising from 2019 to today, that's also, of course, made increasingly difficult by the overall economic setting that we are facing here today. But even more so, it's super important to mobilize the funds. So we're going to hear more about what you have experienced, but now we turn to Luca here. And what I liked about the example from Mauricio also is like that you showed us how you are part of a cooperative effort, yeah? And I think, Luca, that's something where we really hope to hear from you as well, because you are here as a senior policy advisor from the Swiss Development Agency. So that's really one of the key development partners where cooperation and supporting both countries in terms of creating the right regulatory framework, but also maybe supporting companies and initiatives is something that seems to be at the core of what you're doing. So, Luca, with that, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I was hoping Santi would say that we were part of this first round of funding via Accelerate 2030 to Mauricio. Now, of course, he's way too expensive for us. But that's exactly what we're here for. So basically, our role is precisely to support companies like Mauricio's. So just very, very brief the context. So we are a legacy aid agency. So our traditional businesses give money to partner governments, multilaterals, NGOs, and so on. But as you know, with the SDG, with the Addis Ababa climate action agenda, private sector engagement is key. We know that the scarce public ODA that we have cannot do the job, so private sector engagement, and that's what I'm working on at SDC, is becoming, it's a niche. I think we're going to use the word niche a lot in this conversation. So you'll see some of my colleagues over the next couple of days, but we are really a bit exotic within our own organization because the vast majority of work is still more traditional public engagement. Nonetheless, we are really pushing or trying to push private sector engagement in our partner countries, which are traditionally the most difficult context. So actually, Brazil for us is a way too advanced economy to be active in. So the interest rate in Zimbabwe is even a bit more challenging than in your context. And the third sort of context point I really wanted to raise, and I think that's obvious after this conversation, there are no go-to models. There are no partners that we can just say, well, here you are, please fund all these startups. We have to actually invent the model. And so, and I don't think I have to explain this to this audience, the target enterprises that we are looking for, they're not on the efficient investment frontier. The risk-return profile doesn't really match. So we have to do something to bring it to this sweet spot so that, and we're not even talking about mainstream investment can come in, but just impact investing can come in, because the kind of enterprise we're talking about, a circular economy, a circular business in a place like Rwanda or Zimbabwe is not even ready for impact investment, right? So there's two ways of doing that. So either we reduce the risk for the investor, or we work on the revenue of the business. And there's three sort of traditional models that are, I think, at the core of many conversations here at Building Bridges. Obviously, we have the traditional blended finance, which is what you see in one, where we as public actors reduce what private investors by taking a first loss tranche or the like. I don't think that's, SDC does that, and it's an important tool. It has yet to prove that it's working for the kind of market we're talking about. I've yet to see a fully functioning blended finance vehicle for again, the circular business in Rwanda or Brazil or wherever. There's guarantees, another concept that development actors have used traditionally, but not so much in this space either. There's also not that many actors that actually know how to do them well. And so then there's a third point, which is so actually we don't reduce the risk, but we increase the revenue of these companies. There's a lot of talk about positive externalities need to be rewarded. So it's payment for results, incentive payments, there's lots of different names. So what SDC, together with partners, and some of them are in the room, have developed over the last couple of years is really incentive payments for social and environmental impact created by enterprises. It all started with a social impact incentive, or SINC model, which we have pioneered in Latin America starting in 2015, where SDC is an outcome payer. So what we do, we pay a company like Mauricio's if they achieve a certain number of predefined KPIs. So what does that do? It creates a revenue stream for the impact enterprises, which makes it a more attractive investment target compared to traditional enterprises. So we monetize the impact. And the beauty, so there's two things that are really nice of this from a financial architecture point of view, which is for us as a development actor, it actually remains a grant. We just give money, which is what we're good at doing. We don't have to get, because for us it's very complicated if we start into going into different structures, revenue-based models. We have an annual budget. We don't necessarily want to make profit, as the Swiss Development Agency. So it's quite easy for us to do, and we anyway do it mostly through an intermediary. And the second thing is we're not really getting involved in the relationship between the investor and the impact enterprise, because that's still more or less a very much straightforward linear finance model. So we can actually, tweak the systems. I'm not sure, Mauricio, it's the revolution you're asking for, but it helps us, I think, to tweak the system from within. The other player we need is a verifier, and I agree with you, Mauricio, that's costly, and so that's actually part of the conversation at the moment. As we try to go to scale, we're really seeing, okay, how can we make sure this isn't just another burden for the impact enterprise, and I think we are, and then we'll also, I guess, hear a bit about standardization of data for the next speaker, which can then, of course, also help here. So impact-linked finance, and again, this is a product from one of our partners, is really at the intersection of blended finance, impact investing, and results-based finance, and we're happy to say that it's a really fast-growing movement. Again, from SDC's perspective, I mean, we have now more than 50 million Swiss francs involved in different structures. So there's for example, regional structure in East and Southern Africa. There's an impact-linked finance fund for gender-inclusive fintechs. There's applications in clean and renewable energy, a sector which I think has a lot of potential because of the standardization. So you can actually standardize some of the impact KPIs, which also is needed to scale further. And we see new actors coming into the game. And for us as a development actor, I mean, one of the beauty is really that it's with a relatively small amount, because we're really just, paying the marginal additional impact. We're supporting businesses that are then really able to scale. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share in this introductory round, what we can bring to the table.
Super. Luca, thank you for that overview. And I think you said many important things, but there was one, you said like you're good at giving away money. Yeah? So that's
Not
maybe what everybody
yeah.
heard. Yeah. And it's impressive linking it to that chart, what you said at the end, no? That like, Swiss Development Corporation, you are sometimes giving relatively small amounts that make a huge impact and that really nudge the company in the right direction. And that small amount, that seems to be growing and become an even more important aspect of your portfolio. So thank you for that overview. You were also quite sobering because you said you're actually dealing with some of the most difficult countries, and it's really questionable how can we think about circular economy in some of these countries. I also really like the risk, reducing the risk, increasing the rates, revenue or impact chart. And as you said, that brings us to our next speaker. And Pavan Sudkev, you have been around in terms of measuring impact for a long time.
Forever, yes.
And with lots of experience. And when we now drill down a little bit into that, I mean, tell us what the company you are now the CEO of, the GIST or GIST. What are you doing in terms of developing the right KPIs so that when we think about this decision making, either from an investor's perspective or from development cooperation, how can you help us make the best possible decisions when it comes to measuring SDG impact?
Sure thing. Let me say a few things about our company, which is actually it's a startup, and I wish I was more like Maurizio, then I could approach you and get some funding. And hopefully within a few years, I would have positive EBITDA. We still don't, and that is after 8 years of operation. However, we have a lot of positive impact. We have convinced literally hundreds of companies and investors to start looking at positive impacts and negative impacts from a wider lens, which is a lens beyond private profits. Because when we look at a company's performance only from how much shareholder value will it generate over the next 5 years and 10 years, and based on that we can do financing. We are actually narrowing ourselves down to a point where we cannot say that we are promoting sustainability, because what we are saying is we will only promote sustainability if the entrepreneur is good enough like Maurizio or smart enough and the sector is suitable enough for it to generate private profits as well as public benefits. But sometimes that doesn't happen. I'm giving myself as an example, right? Now we'll get there. My colleague is sitting there looking worried out there, Deepanjan, and he's given an example here, which is similar in this context because this is a little rice mill known as Ma Anandmayi Rice Mill. It's in the Indian state of West Bengal. Their total revenue is about 300 million rupees, which is roughly speaking at today's exchange rates, $4 million. So problem number one, they're in what I call the valley of death. Because when you approach a typical financier in the private sector, if it's less than $1 million, they'll support you. If it's more than 5 million, they'll support you. But if it's 2, 3, or 4 million, God help you, because nobody else can. So that's problem number one. Problem two is that actually the entrepreneur here, which is a person who's known to us and someone who's a entrepreneur from a family which has a rice mill, wanted to go circular. So obviously, when you are milling rice, you generate bran and you generate husk. Bran is that sort of material that comes out, which is essentially basically a result of milling, and the husk is the outside of the rice grain. Bran can be converted to rice bran oil. It's odorless, and it is unlike palm oil, so there's no damage cost. So actually, if you compare it with counterfactions like palm oil, you're creating a huge value using rice bran oil, which is an odorless oil. And rice husk can be compressed into pellets, which can be used for energy. So you can burn those bricks as a little bit like a substitute wood of sorts. Now, of course, doing this needs a bit of effort, and it's not very profitable, but here's a guy who's actually doing that, even though it's a small family company which is milling rice in a distant village district in West Bengal, a remote area. And what are they generating in terms of profits from this? Hardly anything. But if you look at the light blue boxes versus the dark blue boxes for which they will get financing and for which they will get support from the Indian banking system, the light blue boxes are 65 to 70% of the value generation of the dark blue boxes, which are the profits, the projected profits of the company. But the local banker is only interested in the dark blue boxes. They have no interest in the light blue boxes because those are social value. They are generating public benefits. So this is challenge number one, and I'll come to 3 other points which I have to make. Challenge number one, and my first point, is that private capital rewards private profits. Private capital seeks private profits, and for it to seek public benefits, then you become a philanthropist. Now, Maurizio or anyone else, you wouldn't just go to a philanthropist and ask begging for money, right? You would just go to, hopefully, a green bond issuer and help you to issue the green bond. You go to SDC or someone like that. But if you're left with a situation where nobody's helping you generate public benefits, except you have a desire to do so because you believe in the right thing and so on, then you are in a problem in a problem zone. And this is where the need for financial support from government organizations, from the SDGs of this world, comes in, because this is where grant money can actually play into the blended finance and make the difference. Because actually, if you think about it, who should be supporting the generation of public benefits by a $4 million rice mill in the middle of nowhere in West Bengal, in India, in eastern India? It should be the government. But they have no money to do this. They have no ability to do this. They don't have any infrastructure. They don't have any control mechanisms. None of that is available to this particular rice miller, Ma Anandmayi rice mill in West Bengal. And this is where the role of public finance comes in, and the structure of public finance and the ability to deliver it right down to the location and the village in which this little rice mill operates, in which there is this entrepreneur who believes in doing the right thing. He could ignore any of this. There's no need for him to try and make no money out of converting his rice husk into pellets and converting his rice bran, which is just residues. He could just do what everyone else does, which is to dump it in the local dumping area, and then it would quietly generate methane. And my friend and colleague, Dipanjan, who's in the audience in front, he has done the calculation for this for free, right? Because we believe in supporting small companies like this. That calculation shows how much social value this company is generating by doing the right thing, for which they are not rewarded, nor are they financed. Okay? Now, why is this story important? I don't need the slides anymore, so you can take it back. Why is the story important? The story is important, my friends, because SMEs are important. And SMEs are important not only because they are small and they need to be helped and it's a good story, but the private sector today is 2/3 of the economy and jobs, economy measured in GDP, jobs as in jobs, right? And out of the private sector, 2/3 of the output and job is actually from SMEs. So do the maths, 0.66 times 0.6 is roughly half the global economy is SMEs. And here we are, building bridges between finance and sustainability. Unless we can make the SME sustainable, we do not have a snowball's hope in hell of making the economy sustainable, right? Because half of it will never be. So that's why the SME is important, because collectively, the SME universe is actually very big. The individual SME may be tiny, like the rice miller that I'm talking about, or Maurizio, when you began your business. But collectively, they are massive. So unless policy and unless global finance recognizes the size importance of SMEs, and size is something the bankers find easy to get their heads around, we are not going to make real progress. So that is point number 2. Point number 3, which is impact investing versus investment impact. So I love your story, and I hope to meet you in Brazil when I visit next. And it's an inspiring story, right? So even though your business is still small, and it's not tiny, but it's small, and even though I know the Brazilian sector is huge, my point is that it's an inspiring story. So even though if you take all of the impact investing universe, mainly bond, measured in terms of financing, mainly it's green bonds and bonds. So it's about, according to GIIN, last year it was $1.1 trillion. The total volume of financing outstanding for the so-called impact investing universe, the entire universe according to them. Now, the total amount of debt and equity outstanding is more like 250 trillion. That's the problem. So you've got the entire world of impact investing is just $1 trillion roughly, whereas 250 trillion is this mountain of money that is supporting the economy that we live in to move in the opposite direction. We are heading blindly and madly into a brown economy direction, and then there's this tiny 0.4%, which is trying to head things in the right direction, and that's great. It's inspiration. But you cannot kill that which inspires. You have to support and nurture what inspires. And this is where the role of impact financing comes in. But at the same time, what about the 99.6%? We need to put a sharp focus of performance, social performance on the entire lot, not just on this small company or Maurizio's great business in sustainable farming, which is producing a great health impact on people's health and a great health impact on soils by not poisoning it with chemical pesticides and fertilizers. But on the whole, and the comparison has to be not between an SME which is doing the right thing on profit basis and a big company which is doing the wrong thing on a profit basis. It should be on total performance versus total performance, which means for the big company, the impacts per $1 million of revenue, which will include massive negative impacts of chemical pesticides and fertilizers, versus the impacts per $1 million of revenues of something like your business, Maurizio, where you will have a positive impact on human health against any counterfactual, because the people who are eating the food that your 35 farms are growing out there will not die of chemical poisoning, and they will not suffer as a result of endocrine disruption, right, which is coming from the use of pesticides inside that farming. Those are the differences that have to come out to the banker, not just to the development banker, but to any banker in the world, when they are evaluating the difference between sustainable farming and non-sustainable farming. But that difference will not come out until we start measuring and disclosing impacts and measuring them in economic terms. Because, my friends, I've been a banker in my life before, and I know that we think dollars. And I've been to any number of boards, and I've met so many CEOs in my life. And yes, they all think dollars. It's finally converting the impacts into economic language that makes a difference. It's not because of me or people like me or other economists that we are in this world. It is the nature of where we are. Economics is the currency of policy, whether we like it or not. Even governments think in the same terms. So we need to work our way towards using an impact valuation framework, which is accepted by most people. Capitals Coalition, the Natural Capital Protocol, so many different people. You have heard TNFD, etc. You've heard about all of these. And using that kind of framework, it will put the world of the 250 trillion on the same basis as the world of the 1.1 trillion, right? Then the positive externalities of Maurizio or of this rice miller in West Bengal will be accounted for as part of their performance, your performance, and the negative externalities of the Nestle's and the Syngentas of this world will be accounted for as part of their performance, minus, right? When that happens, only then do we have a fair and equitable comparison between two businesses which are in the same space of food systems, right? This is why it's so important to measure, because what you do not measure, you do not manage. There is no scope, no chance of achieving sustainability until we measure impacts. And I think everything that is happening at this conference needs to focus on that and ensure that the message goes out from us loud and clear. All of you, my friends, are here because you are in the world which inspires. You are part of the 1.1 trillion in terms of your financing. I'm not saying in terms of how much good you do, in terms of just the financing that you get, right? You are part of that small world. I'm saying to you that you need to be insisting on the fair metrics, on a fair way of being measuring your performance, total performance, versus the people who are coming into the building bridges, which is the big corporations. And there is such a fair way. It is called impact accounting. We need standards for impact accounting. We need to move in that direction as a community, understanding that we are beset with a common set of problems, which is unsustainability, the planetary boundaries, and of course, biggest of them all, which is climate change. So I close with that and say that the inspirational power of the small world to which we all belong, including, I guess, Deepanjan and I in our own way, is huge. But the fairness with which we are treated is not good enough. We need to ask for fairness. And the only fairness that will happen is when our results get accounted, not just by good development bankers like you, but by all bankers using the same metrics, which is impact metrics, not just financial metrics for the shareholders, but impacts for the whole of society, for all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Many thanks, Pavan. Another super inspirational speech, and the key messages you gave us to continue our discussion in terms of like private capital rewarding private profit, yeah, something very clear. The importance of SMEs economically, but also in terms of sustainability impact. So the niche we are dealing with is actually not such a small niche, yeah. And thirdly, the importance for sustainability metrics. And also that this is important to think about, on the one hand, impact investing, but also investing in impact. Yeah, so very clear story with the rice mill from West Bengal that you showed us. So I think we've had like 4 wonderful speeches, and I've seen the audience sort of like, you know, listening and taking note. And we have another 25 minutes here. So before I bother our 4 speakers with an additional round of questions, and I see already Santu raising her hand to drill into more, so maybe some of the challenges, some of the solutions, and the way forward. Let me just also invite the audience to think about sharing with us your story, your question, your example, your way forward, so that we can make it a little bit of an engaging discussion. But Santu, was there something very specific you wanted to add? We start with you.
No, I just wanted to also bring it to the audience. As you were saying, so we have your example from Brazil, but in the audience we have a couple of circular companies from Zimbabwe that are very much in a very different economy, in a very different situation than Mauricio in Brazil. And I just wanted to hear from you, if you want to share a little bit who you are, and also what are your current challenges in finding financing in Zimbabwe. Give us a little bit of a reality check of your situation.
Great, thank you, Santu. So to be exactly there, we have colleague from Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so they're part of the same program as Mauricio Accelerate 2030.
Thank you so much, Santu. All right, thank you. My name is Chipochkomo from Zimbabwe, and I'm the founder of Innovate4SDGs, and it's a private limited company. Can everyone hear? Can you hear me? It wasn't really working. All right, my name is Chipochkomo from Zimbabwe. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So the challenges that we currently are facing is that I think it's more of the perception that the world has on our countries, emerging markets, especially in Africa. So at times we are told that access finance from your banks, but then the interest rates sometimes is very high, and it's not sustainable for us to then have a return on the investment in the time that would have been proposed. So it's really a challenge trying to finance the innovations that we are seeing working, and we already know that they just need this capital injection, which we don't know how to finance it. Thank you so much.
Many thanks for sharing very specific and concrete experience from Zimbabwe. I'm looking a little bit at the room here. I saw one hand here, and I will be watching out then we have a second Zimbabwe hand, and then we have a Munich hand, if I remember correctly. So let's go this direction. And please identify yourself when you take the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Christoph Zuckerberger from Geneva, Oikos Invest, and other foundations. You, Maurizio, you spoke about the Big Four, and I'm also struggling with this question of Audit is very important, and I think nobody would challenge the necessity. But the costs for startups, for foundations, is a real challenge. I had I was since 30 years in development, discussions with some of the four big, and is there a model of differentiation? And there are some models, but I would challenge, maybe there are some in the room, or also your experience, how to solve this problem, because it's really often almost killing for startups or for small projects, and then you are forced to use not the four big, but the small local, which are often not transparent or even corrupt, and then you are in a new dilemma. So how to solve this financing problem of the audit?
Great question. So follow up on how to solve the financing problem for the audits that are very expensive. Let's take the other two, and then we play it back to the panel. Second story from Zimbabwe, correct?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Chiedza Mshawedu, co-founder and managing director for Zimbo Zabantu Healthcare on Wheels, which is a social ingenious enterprise of locally built mobile clinics that technologically forward using telemedicine and solar-related components to power our primary healthcare services devices. So my point is, for me to get to where I am today, trying to play my small part in changing the face of health service delivery in the country, especially in Zimbabwe, I had to locally build our first prototype of mobile clinic that was solar-powered at the backyard at my house using our own personal financing to upscale to the current 4 vehicles that we currently have and operating in one province. It's hard being a startup in Zimbabwe, especially being an African woman trying to change the narrative and also access to funding. You are playing a huge part, and to date we have managed to impact more than 30,000 people as an individual and employing 30 people. And for me to grow or upscale to other new provinces, I need funding. But you approach banks, the interests are high, they need collateral. How am I supposed to do it? Already I'm making an impact in changing the face of health. And since going commercial, November of 2022, I've already managed to break even in July, and by year ending, I'll be closing my books at 280,000. This business is proving to be viable, but I don't have partners. And how many people like myself are able to come to Geneva and speak in terms of impact that they are making on the ground? Thank you.
Great story, and I think this deserves another round of applause. Yeah. So this real challenge of accessing financing and finding partners from the perspective of a female-owned SME, and I think that's really, you spoke about investing your personal finances in the prototype, and you managed to break even. So maybe a question also later for development cooperation, how this, not niche, but this important aspect is being addressed. And I think we had Munich over here, yeah?
Munich was in the past, now it's Lausanne, but still, yeah. So actually, I came to Switzerland five years ago, and my last role was actually in a startup, only held by a medium-sized company. It was a consumer electronics startup, and I left actually because they were not ready, the investors were not ready for both. One, really using a great product for sustainability, and especially on emerging markets in a dermatology case. And yeah, that's what was the reason I left, and basically the investors were not ready. So I also have this kind of mindset maybe where money might be. For them, it was 50% of their R&D budget just in this startup, in their investment, so it was quite also related to IP things. But back from them, I have the experience and the view, and also till today I'm working now as innovation consultant and also startup coach, that I feel the technology availability is sometimes not the problem. It's really just the case we heard here, and also mindset of the investor side. So also this I would add to, as you already summarized, maybe as a third aspect, if that's okay. I know a lot of questions for the four of you already, but also to the discussion. So is technology availability still a cause, or is it really more mindset and implementation and infrastructural things and so on, especially if we talk about circularity? Thank you.
Many thanks. So great points. On the one hand, re-emphasizing the importance to get the investors ready, and let's hope that the Building Bridges discussion, like today and also yesterday at the summit, is sort of helping the investors to get ready. Yeah? But I really appreciated that you also mentioned innovation, because that's sort of like innovation technology is something we really wanted to discuss here. Before I come back to the panel, I see one hand in the back. Let's take one more, and then one more. It's great to have such an engaged audience. Let's try to be short. We go from the back to the front and then to the panel.
Hi, that's perfect. Thank you, everyone, for the question and the answer. We've seen a lot of very interesting projects and meaningful impact. Where I see challenges right now is how to build solution at scale. For example, we've built a search engine, impact-driven search engine with Microsoft to fund impact project in Africa. So we take a percentage of the ad market to fund impact project in Africa. But we don't see how to find the first check partner who is able to see the positive impact rather than the, let's say, return on investment in the below 5 years, I would say. So this is, for me, where I see challenges, is where to find the first partner able to bet on the person and the vision rather than having only the return on investment and the meaningful, let's say, risk and mitigating risk. Sorry. Yeah.
Great. So again, finding the first partner. Can you just identify yourself so we know where you're coming from?
Sorry. Moussa Touré from Mayan.
Many thanks. Yeah. And then we had here a lady. Yeah. And then a gentleman next to you, no? And please do identify yourself.
Is this working? Yes. Hi, Joan Fulton, working on driving finance with ocean assets to SMEs in the global south and the blue economy. So we must talk. The other question actually is for Maurizio. I have two small questions. The reality is you were fighting big players in Brazil, big economic players in the ag space. How were you able to do that? Because the reality is big ag players, big money, big power, and it's very hard to speak up. And the second one is last year you spoke about the burden of impact reporting. So I'd like an update to know whether that has improved or is it still as heavy and costly, not just auditing, but all the impact reporting, because it sounds very nice, but for a company, and especially a startup, it is deadly. So those are my two questions.
Excellent. Very important nuance to our list and addition. And then we had gentlemen next to you. And then we close it and play it back to the panel.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentations. My name is Ludovic Claude. I'm actually originally from Cameroon. I'm currently the founder of Aquafuel. I'm actually developing the first pilot to facilitate access to clean water in Cameroon for people who lack access to water at an affordable price. My question is twofold. The first part is about, from the startup's perspective, in emerging countries, how do you help them basically to structure their projects so that they become bankable enough in order to attract the finance? Because we know that a lot of funding out there, but how do we help those kind of like startups to become bankable? And is there a way to measure the bankability of those projects so that actually the funders can see it and then kind of like be interested in it? And from the finance side, we know that especially bank, they think short term. I mean, they're risk averse, right? And also they have a pressure from shareholders to deliver result on a quarterly basis. How do we encourage them to think longer term and to take more risk in order to invest in startups? Thank you.
Great. So we really have a whole lot of questions here, ranging from, let's say, listing some of the challenges. Now, on the financial side, how to get the investors ready, how to get the banks ready, but also sort of like how to structure the activities and how to avoid that you have to do everything with your personal financing. So the challenges around financing, the challenges around finding the right partner, I think also very important. And then the challenges around accounting, auditing, but also the sustainability impact reporting. And I think that's very relevant also from a trade perspective. If SMEs wish to export based on their sustainability certification, there are many certifications that one needs to comply with. So that's definitely an issue as well. Shall we go the same order as before? We start with Santo, then Mauricio, Luca, and Pavan. You wrap it all up? Yeah? Let's do that way. Santo.
Yeah. I want to build on the reporting side, maybe, and it's also maybe I have a question to you, Pavan, because at this conference here, we say we need metrics, we need data, we need, no. And maybe also one question. I mean, it's not necessarily because of the lack of metrics that has brought us to the place where we are today, you know? And sometimes that's what I'm pondering about, that the difference maybe of the traditional actors that need all the metrics and data to be able to be sure this is a safe investment versus the venture capitalists that like trust the team, know the value of the team, know what they're up to and their vision and their you know, they invest in the team. You know? And so for me, it is that major question that, you know, will we change things fast enough just by data and more metrics? Or and that's why I want to pass on. I'm sure that you have some things to share about how that has been all the investment part. And at the same time, you know, I do believe that we need all that. We need to start monetizing impact. But for the startups, it can also kill a startup to ask for all those metrics at a very early stage. So this is what I'm pondering about when we are designing these type of vehicles. You know, are we creating something so complex that won't be possible? And yet we know we're in a world where we need to speak metrics. So wanted to share that bit, but I don't know if you also have something to add on that part of the whole, the reporting part.
Shall we move to Mauricio and then?
Sure. Wow, so many questions. I just left 2 hours, so I didn't get too jet lagged. But anyways, let's go. So I think in terms of startups, how to get the first check, and then the whole, you know, system on accessing funds and the whole reports we need to create, not only the sustainability reports, but also, you know, full of paperwork there, KPIs. I'm an entrepreneur since I was 14, so I broke, I think, 4 times. Now it's been 12 years without breaking any company, but so before that I broke a lot of companies, trying and learning from my mistakes. What I see, yeah, and I'm also an angel investor today, so I'm putting a lot of small checks in different companies, usually today more agtechs, but yeah, in technology, I was part of, you know, VR startups, humanoid robotic company and all those things. The reason why we couldn't get the first check most of the times, it was more about, you know, organizing the ideas and actually having a business plan. Actually having a P&L, a projected P&L, even if it's not going to happen. But that shows that at least you know how, you know, to do math and you know what you need to get there. For example, in Solubil, we started to audit our balance sheet since our first year. The first one was a really cheap external audit, but we got one. And then we started, you know, to increase the money we put in that pocket, and that's the way we got here. So that's why we got the first check. Why? Oh, how come you have only 20 employees? You are making, I don't know, $500,000 revenue, and you have an external audit. Oh, you have a business plan. Oh, seriously, you have your balance sheets. If I ask you the last 30 days you have, oh my gosh, that's different. And that's not costly, you know, if you start in small steps. That's the way we got here. So that's one thing. But today, it's still quite expensive. You know, there was here our sustainability report. We did it in-house. We are tracking a lot of KPIs. We don't have systems to track ESG KPIs. But now that we got the green bonds, we need to report on those KPIs. Can you guess how much money we spend? Not spend, we invest. I don't say spend. We invest in our sustainability report. In-house sustainability report. Because to create it, I mean, the output is the report. But how do we get the data? And how do we actually not only get the data, but we can actually measure and then manage the KPIs? That's Peter Drucker, right? $400,000. That's the cost today. And we are a small company. But again, then you ask again, which company is actually investing this to create a whole sustainability report? That's why now we can access, $100 million check we can get today. I mean, today we can't get, there are a lot of covenants going there, and then, Brazilian, inflation, but we are able to get.
Great. I loved how you said it's not about spending on the sustainability reporting, but it's an investment, no? So, Luca, what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, maybe I thank you from the colleagues from Zimbabwe and asking a bit the question of how where you look for finance, and I mean this is exactly, I think, as I showed in the beginning, the missing middle, valley of death, whatever term. So I used the graphic of not being on the efficient frontier, and this is really where we're working on. So I made this one, so the ILF, the Impact Linked Finance, I think is really a powerful tool. We are also, we made an investment into a fund that I think was on the stage last year here. It's the Build Fund run by the fund manager Bamboo Capital Partners based here in Geneva. It's, to my knowledge, the first blended finance vehicle really focusing on LDCs and focusing on SDG-oriented businesses in LDCs. As it happens, we do have a window for Zimbabwe, and so yeah, let's talk about that maybe bilaterally. So we really are, and there's also some TA available, which goes a bit because we definitely. So we're really trying to see, okay, does this traditional blended finance model, how far down the value chain can we make it work without having to actually tweak the rules of the game? And I think the Build Fund is a very interesting exercise in that. SDC together with I think 4 other public donors have already put a lot of first loss money in there. Now we're waiting for the private investors to come because they always tell us, well, we just need some de-risking and then we'll follow the money. So yeah, this is exactly I think what we're trying to do. So that on this question, and then I think the whole the impact measurement debate. It's I think I agree. I mean, we need to get to scale. We need to get some standardization. We need to make it worth for entrepreneurs to have data. Instead of costing 400,000, it should be an asset of 400,000 if you can sell your impact data, because of course we're living in a data-driven world. We as official development financiers, we have to show the impact that we're achieving, so we're guilty as charged on that. But for me, the hope is really in certain standardization and getting to KPIs, to indicators at a sector level. I think I mentioned briefly, clean energy, solar panels, and so on. It's a relatively easy one, and if we because you already have the data, we're all measuring the same things, and if we get to that, instead of maybe having 500 indicators, but having 5 that are meaningful, but at the same time also comparable, and investors then can also take it into account, then I think we're getting somewhere. Last word, the impact-linked finance. One advantage of impact-linked finance is really that you're forced into this dialogue of really making explicit your impact. So to the graphic with the I think it was light blue and dark blue, you're really asked to show us the light blue or whatever it was, the top, because that's what the impact linked finance fund is paying for, and ideally, this is a stepping stone towards a system where this is, positive externalities are paid across the board. Maybe at some point, governments, like the government of Brazil, realizes that paying for impact, just a small amount to companies like yours, is actually much more efficient than implementing very costly policies and trying to regulate things and so on and so forth. So I think that's what I wanted to add.
That the Brazilian the annual fund. The government, they lend some money for farmers every year. So this year, if you are using biologicals, they are giving discount in the interest rates. You just need to show that you are using biologicals and you get the money a little bit cheaper, like 1% cheaper, which is a lot.
Super. That links directly to you, Pavan, please.
It's delighted to hear the 1%. Is that BNDES or all Brazilian banks? All Brazilian banks. That's fantastic. But I'm horrified to hear this $400,000 story. And by the way, was it one of the big 4 who charged you that for doing the sustainability report?
No, One part is the external audit, which is a big four, but then there is the whole work to be done, getting the data, analyzing the data. Every month you need to analyze and see if that's right or not. So it's a lot of work. We have 3 people working in the ESG area just to track KPIs.
Yeah, I think this is the reason why my company exists, actually, because for instance, we charge for SMEs $500 for the entire system. Per annum, every year, you can pay $500 and get the system.
Yeah, but the problem is, for example, okay, how do I get the data from SAP or the whole ERP?
No, you don't have to worry about that. The system imputes it. So if you're an SME, if you just put in your location and what business you're in, and just the electricity bill, which is the total power, and the total water that you consume, your water bill, that's enough. We can give you a sustainability report based on just that. Who you are, what you do, where you are. Where is very important, because where will tell us where the power grid is that's providing you power. So a lot of this is just automated based on global databases, which we have and everybody has access to. But the problem is nobody wants to go that way. Why? Because the whole area of ESG, by the way, this ESG is just a scam. I'm sorry to say this. There are 600 different ESG rating methodologies issued by more than 150 different organizations. So if you are Maurizio or anybody, you can literally select an ESG rating every day of the year, and you will still have 250 left. Right? What is this nonsense? There needs to be one approach, maybe 1 or 2 raters, like S&P and Moody's for bank credit. So I'm saying that I can't reveal the actual amount, but it's less than 500. That when UPS, the American Parcel Service, came to us, look, we have lots of value chain exporters, SMEs who are interested. We quoted them a price where effectively for their 5,000 so-called green exporters, they're even charging less than 500 per company. And yes, nobody is able to put all the data in. You don't need to. I mean, the whole point of having big data and having people like us who are doing big data is that we should be able to calculate estimates for you which are good enough until such time as you have enough people, enough money, and enough time and patience to actually find out things like, okay, what is my total air pollution? Well, I'd be surprised if you knew what is your total air pollution, but if you tell me what is your energy use, who you are, and where you are, we know what is the grid component of the electricity. We can work out the air pollution.
I really need to jump on that. The problem is that we create frameworks that don't work. For example, we have been asked to create a GRI report. That's a nightmare. But then when I go to ask for money, where is your sustainability report? Or is it based in GRI or whatever shit we have around? Sorry for my French, but that's true.
No, so I think the good news is, let's leave you some good news. I know the world would like, by the way, can anyone guess what is the total amount of money that all these big companies, smart people pay for getting ESG ratings per year? Take a guess. Anyone? No, sorry, ESG ratings, aggregate. The total fee pool in this, yeah. It's $2 billion. $2 billion, B-I-L-L-I-O-N, dollars, yeah. $2,000 million. That's how much money. So in some ways, I'm making you feel less sad that you paid 400,000, right? Because because you're actually a small part of a very big problem. Right? So be happy, Maurizio. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Good. Maybe as we are getting towards the closer here, and we are finishing on a laugh. Yeah. Let me thank everybody for this amazing discussion. I think we are building some bridges here. Yeah, we started off thinking we are looking at a niche. We realized that we are much more than a niche. We've had a wonderful audience following some really inspirational beginning statements here. And I heard one thing. I heard several speakers saying last year or last time. So I very much hope that next year for Building Bridges, we can come back here. We will have a room as full as today and an audience as engaging as today. And we will already have a few more solutions and be able to drill down into these many important and difficult questions. So big thank you to the speakers. Big thank you to all of you.